It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Rich Hua from Amazon Web Services. Rich was responsible for driving the go-to-market strategy for AWS's managed database service, Aurora, one of the most advanced and fastest growing cloud-based database solutions. Rich also founded the Silicon Valley chapter of Amazon's Culture of Innovation program, and he has delivered innovation briefings to senior executives from organizations around the world. Being a firm believer and champion in emotional intelligence, Rich launched the Emotional Intelligence and Success Initiative at Amazon, and his team has trained over 100,000 Amazon employees globally, and his training is now an integral part of the onboarding, sales, and leadership development programs across multiple Amazon companies. Rich was recently named the worldwide head of Epic Leadership and Chief EQ Evangelist. And his mission is to train Amazon's leaders in emotional intelligence and interpersonal dynamics so they can lead with greater empathy, purpose, inspiration, and connection. Epic. So Richard, the floor is yours. Thank you. And again, put your questions in the chat room, and we'll start the presentation right now.
All right. Thank you for that warm introduction, Grace. I didn't realize it was such a mouthful that I sent over to you. So anyway, really happy to be able to be with you today and share for your program. As was mentioned, my name is Rich Hua. I'm the worldwide head of the Epic Leadership Program, and really excited to be able to help up-level the emotional and social intelligence of essentially over 1 million people at Amazon. So that is my charter over the next few years, as well as to also turn around and share these learnings with the world at large. That as we learn, as we grow, as we evolve, that we can also share the things that we have both learned from doing it right and doing it wrong with our customers and others. So today I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence to supercharge your success. And you may be wondering why we're going to talk about this. You'll find out more in just a few minutes. But you'll get an understanding more deeply of what emotional intelligence is and why it's important. You'll also learn some tips and skills on how to reduce your stress, be more positive, boost your grit, be more likable, and increase your empathy. And you also get some resources to continue your EQ journey going forward. So before I jump in, I did want to tell a story about a really good friend of mine who immigrated to the United States when he was really a young child. He had attention deficit disorder, so much so he was kicked out of preschool after basically the first day. So he's very awkward, had a hard time concentrating, and really didn't know how to make friends. And so he had a lot of unpleasant experiences and emotions growing up: loneliness, fear, anxiety, discouragement, sadness, and he was bullied, faced racism. And so he decided to forget about all the emotional stuff and excel intellectually, ignore his emotions and kind of be more like a robot, right? Well, he thought, well, if you're going to succeed, be at least a genius robot. So he worked really hard at academics, got a perfect score on the SAT, got into every college he applied to, studied electrical engineering, computer science, and everything was going great until he did one thing that threw a giant wrench in his plans, and that was called he got married. And then of all things, he became a missionary and an evangelist for a church. And he realized that he had to figure out this thing called emotions. Well, he really dove in, read lots of books, took courses, got a lot of coaching, dramatically improved. And after several decades of doing that work as a missionary and evangelist, he actually pivoted back into the corporate world, applied those skills, really excelled, got promoted multiple times, became a leader, and started training other people in these skills because he realized that they were the secret to his success. Well, I actually have a confession to make. The story is not about a friend of mine. It's actually about me. That is basically my life story in 2 minutes. And this is my own EQ growth journey over time. From an awkward kid growing up in Illinois to being married a little over 30 years ago to my wonderful and amazing wife, Antoinette. And here are my kids, and family at the Ponte Vecchio in Italy. Can't wait to go back. And so over that course of time, I've had the privilege of being able to share what I've learned in my own life with, literally over 120 some thousand people, from C-level executives to aspiring managers to brand new people in the workforce to entrepreneurs, right? And I've been able to collaborate with some of the most amazing people like Dan Goldman and Mark Brackett and Meng Tan, who founded the Emotional Intelligence Program at Google. And so I'm going to share some of these things with you today in the hopes that it can help you in your success, both professionally and personally. So one of my first questions is, are emotions appropriate at work? A lot of people ask this question, right? But I actually have a converse question, and that is, are emotions avoidable at work, right? And I have actually a little quiz question, a little poll. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat. Actually, I'll do this several times throughout our presentation today. So I'd love to get some interaction, since the only way that I know you actually are in existence are if you say something in the chat and later on, maybe verbally. I'd love to see, what percentage of the day do you think the average person experiences emotions, right? Anywhere from 0%, if you happen to be a Vulcan, to 100%. So put in the chat and just put it out to everyone so we can see, what percentage of the day do you think a human being experiences emotions? Okay, see my first couple of people saying 100. Okay, I see a 75, 80, 90, 85, 100. Okay, all right, see a 5. I see a high of 100, a low of 5. There's a little bit of outlier, but if you actually take it an average, you generally come up with the right answer. It's kind of really interesting. Research has found it's between 90 and 100%. So almost every meeting, every customer call, one-on-one, forecast, business sort of work, regression analysis, spreadsheet work, whatever you're doing, almost all the time you're experiencing some kind of emotion. And in fact, another question is, are emotions valuable at work? And the answer is absolutely yes, if they're leveraged correctly, right? I mean, think about it. Concern for a colleague who's struggling, excitement about a project or a customer meeting, anger over inequity that you may see, gratitude for your team. Those are all emotions, and they can absolutely be really advantageous to your success if they're used intelligently. And I love this quote from Paul Graham, whom many of you know, founder of Y Combinator. He said that we thought when we started Y Combinator that the most important quality would be intelligence. That's the myth in the Valley. What matters most is determination. And he's got obviously a really well-known blog post. And he found that, this idea of determination is really squarely in the realm of emotional intelligence, not your typical IQ. So what do emotions do to us? Dr. Mark Brackett, who's a colleague of mine and also the founder of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, did research and found that emotions influence all 5 of the things you see here on the screen, right? Our ability to pay attention, decision-making, all our relationships, our physical and mental health, that one's probably pretty obvious, and our performance and creativity. And in fact, it's really interesting because every decision actually has an emotional component to it. He did this really interesting study where he had a group of teachers, a large number of them, all grade the same essay. But he had half of them think about a negative classroom experience before grading it, and then, grade it. And then the other half think of a positive classroom experience and do the grading. And guess what the results were? The average of the negative ones who are in a bad mood was a full grade or 2 lower than the ones who are in a good mood. And when those teachers were asked, do you think your mood had anything to do with the grade you gave? 87% said, oh, absolutely not. I'm totally objective. They got the grade they deserve. Well, the fact is they didn't realize it, but our emotions absolutely impact the decisions that we make. In fact, other studies have shown that the worst time to actually go to court, if you're ever in that situation, is guess when? 11 a.m. to about 12:30 p.m. Why is that? Because the judge is hangry. And so they're much more likely to give you a harsher sentence, not give you parole because of their mood. And so little pro tip, if you ever do have to go to court, try to do it early in the morning or right after lunch, So the bottom line is, whether we realize it or not, emotions have a lot to do with all these things here. So which ones of these would you like to remove from your repertoire of skills during your workday, right? I mean, obviously none of them. They're all really important. So here's another poll question. I'd love to see your answer in the chat as well. How important do you think emotional intelligence is to long-term success? We're talking career success, right? Though this can be applied to your personal life as well. But what do you think? Put an A, B, C, D, or E. Okay. The highest is obviously E at 85%, and the lowest is A. Okay, so lots of E's, C, some D's. Okay. I see a C. Okay. All right. So most people say E. There's some D's and C's. Okay. So the answer is, in fact, E. Right. There's some research done by the Carnegie Institute of Technology a few years ago that found that 85% of your financial, your career success is due to these skills in human engineering, right? Communicating, negotiating, leading, and shockingly only 15% due to IQ. Now, interestingly enough, how many of us have taken courses in math and science and history and languages, right? Every single one of us. And yet, how many of us have taken any significant courses on emotional intelligence? If you have, put it in the chat. I'd love to see on what course you may have taken. What's really interesting is that obviously we could spend 12, 16, 20 years doing all the IQ stuff and literally zero on the EQ, even though it accounts for more success. Well, the world is, waking up to that. And that's actually really fascinating that people are now realizing how important EQ is. At Stanford, if you're in the Graduate School of Business and part of the leadership track, an emotional intelligence course is actually required. You have to take one whole quarter of emotional intelligence training. At Google, when you become a new manager, you now take 4 hours of EQ training in the first day of your new manager. And of course, at Amazon, I'm driving this epic program. We've trained, over 100,000 people and continue to dive deeper into these skills. And the goal is to actually have every single manager within Amazon up-level their EQ skills over time. So thank you for the comments. I see that you've done some in high school, of course, with Sarah Spradlin. Excellent. So, it's still a minority, right? It's a minority of people who have access to this. And my goal is to help it become a majority. So some people often ask, how could it possibly be 85%, right? Isn't IQ important? And Dr. Daniel Goleman, who's, really one of the luminaries in the field of this research, explains it this way. He says, IQ is, of course, important, but it's what he calls a threshold ability, whereas EQ is what he calls a distinguishing ability, right? IQ gets you through the door, but EQ is what really makes you a star performer, right? So think about where you're at right now. You're an entrepreneur, you're starting a company, you're trying to make something happen. The bottom line is once you're smart enough, all the rest of it is EQ, right? How are you going to distinguish yourself as an entrepreneur, as a company, whatever products you have? Is it by somehow being smarter than everybody else? Very unlikely, because everyone else is pretty darn smart. It's going to be much more through qualities such as cognitive control, grit, staying cool under pressure, knowing how to influence others while managing yourself. And of course, as Paul Graham said, things like determination and resilience, right? A Career Builder recently did a study, and they found that 71% of managers and HR professionals prefer high EQ over high IQ for success on the job. So what is EQ anyway? It's one of the three things that determine how you think and act, right? Your IQ, which are obviously cognitive abilities, your personality, which is, sort of your bent on the world and how you think and approach things, what you prefer. And then there's EQ, which is a set of skills that can be defined really as the intelligent use of emotions, or having emotions work for you rather than against you. And the really good thing about EQ that may be a bit distinct from the other two components here is that it's totally flexible. It's actually a set of skills that you can learn and develop over time. And I'm a living testament to that, having very, very low EQ for the first 20 some odd years of my life and dramatically growing in those skills to the point that I'm now teaching other people, in the ensuing years. So let's break it down and dive a bit deeper. There are 4 components of emotional intelligence, and you see them there on the screen. There's self-awareness and self-management. And then there's social awareness and relationship management. And those all work together to help us be able to have higher emotional intelligence. And I love this quote from Oprah Winfrey. The whole point of being alive is to evolve into the complete person you're meant to be. And increasing our emotional intelligence is really a key part of that evolution to become, shall I dare say, a better and more effective version of ourselves. So let's talk about personal competencies, and then we're going to talk about some social competencies. And this first part is about how you manage yourself. So ask yourself this question. Have you ever just lost it You know, like flowing off the handle, maybe someone cut in front of you in the freeway, or, you know, these days came up to you with no mask and started breathing on you really hard, you know, talking really loudly. I mean, those things, you know, create a visceral response, right? Maybe you say something that you kind of think, oh my goodness, that was really mean, or you want to pull the words back in your mouth as soon as it came out. Or you think back and you go, why on earth did I just do that? That made absolutely no sense, right? And the reality is self-management can be difficult sometimes, right? Or, you know, a couple of years ago, remember back in the beginning of the pandemic when people were literally getting into fistfights at the grocery store or Costco over toilet paper? Like, what are people thinking? And we've all had those experiences. And there's actually a neurological reason for why we can basically lose it. It has to do with basically the way our brain works. You know, when stimuli come into our brain, it goes into the oldest part, which, you know, is affectionately called the lizard brain, but it's officially called the amygdala. You know, it's part of the limbic system, detects threats, it sets off the alarms if it sees a threat or detects one, and it's where you feel your emotions, right? So that fight or flight or freeze response. Well, a few seconds later, it kind of moseys on over to the prefrontal cortex where we have the rational thought, the filtering, the decision-making, you know, the judgment and reasoning. And so that's kind of how it's generally supposed to work. And they're supposed to kind of work in sync with each other, right? Daniel Kahneman, if you've read his work, Thinking Fast and Slow, you could call the amygdala system, you know, the system one, the fast one, and the prefrontal rational one, the slow one, right? System two. Now, what can happen is that if the stimulus is really, really strong, the amygdala basically hijacks your brain and the prefrontal cortex is offline. So you're pure emotion for a period of time. And that's when the stuff might happen that you really think back on and go, that made absolutely no sense and was not helpful. Now, here's the thing, evolutionary wise, this is fantastic, right? You're walking along the plains or savannas and you see something that looks like a saber-toothed tiger. I mean, you just want to get the heck out of there, right? You just want to start running, dive in a ditch, jump in a cave. You didn't have time to sit there and think about your options. However, these days, if you're sitting in a meeting with, you know, an investor or your boss or your, you know, colleague or significant other, and they say something really makes you mad, you may not want to say the first thing that comes to mind. It may not be helpful for that relationship, right? So the point is, the amygdala is a powerful and awesome system that kept us alive. But today, since we're no longer running from saber-toothed tigers necessarily, we need to learn how to put that together with our prefrontal cortex and have emotionally intelligent behavior and decisions. And that's what all this actually is about. So let me ask a question now. We've been in this pandemic for a couple of years, and there's some things that are happening to all of us. And I'd love to understand from all of you here, have you experienced any of these in the past few months? And put a yes or some acknowledgement in the chat if you have. How about this one? Difficulty sleeping, worried about work, family, other responsibilities. You know, you want to go to sleep, but your mind is still racing and buzzing and just kind of tossing and turning, right, in your bed. How about anxiety upon waking, right? Right, I see a bunch of yeses. Right when you wake up in the morning, your mind's already buzzing with all the stuff you got to do. You haven't even gotten out of bed, and you're like, "Oh, I forgot to send this email. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do that. Oh, I got to, you know, deal with this sort of fire drill." Okay, see lots of yeses there. How about difficulty switching off an evening? You know, you close your laptop. You're supposed to be done with work, and you're trying to settle down. You know, watch some Ted Lasso or a Squid Game or, you know, K-drama or Amazon Prime or whatever you're watching. And yet your brain is still going. The laptop is closed, but the brain is still open, and you just can't switch gears, right? And a few others. Do you feel yourself become more pessimistic, isolated, maybe a little more negative? You know, generally you're a positive person, but it's harder to do that these days. And, you know, and so what am I describing here? You see it on the picture. It's what almost every person in the world is either experiencing or on the verge of experiencing or threatened by it. Yes, it's burnout, right? And we've had 2 years of this thing called the COVID-19 pandemic. Uncertainty. Are we going back to the office? Are we not? You know, what about travel? Is it safe? What about this new variant? What about future variants? I mean, there's so much stuff going on. And the reality is that the average person in the United States has been working 3 or more extra hours per day. Can you relate to that? I mean, I work at Amazon Web Services, and I and all my colleagues, like, we basically replaced our commute with work. And, you know, if you have a global role like I do, pretty much you could start at 5:30 in the morning and not end until 9 p.m. some days. I mean, it is just wild. You can't keep this up, right? And so what we need to do is we all need to learn techniques to prevent emotional hijacking and burnout. Okay, and so I'm going to actually give you a bunch today that I hope will help and that you can leverage not just during the pandemic, but after the pandemic, at any time in your life, because we're all going to basically face stress, and we're all going to basically be, at different times threatened by burnout. So how do we do this? I love this concept, which is being buoyant, right? When you look at that bear right there, what's a word that comes to mind? Put in the chat. I'd actually love to see. How would you describe this picture of this polar bear that's playfully kind of floating there? Adorable. That's a good one. I like that one. Yes. Can I take you home? Relaxed, having fun, carefree. Okay. See, chill, chillaxed. Excellent, right? There's lots of great words, right? Focused, enjoying, there's a lot of things, but the point is this: we want to learn to be emotionally buoyant. This is a metaphor for how we want our minds and our emotions to be, because sometimes the water is nice and calm, and other times there are giant waves literally roiling about, threatening to push us down under the water. So what we need to do is learn some skills to be able to float despite the circumstances around us. And there are 2 keys to buoyancy that I want to talk about today. The first is positivity, and the second is grit. Positivity is kind of learning how to float, and grit is essentially knowing how to come back up to the surface when the waves push you on down. So why are we talking about positivity? Well, the reason we need to do this is because we actually tend to be negative, and actually most people tend to be that way. We have this thing called the negativity bias, which means we remember and notice negative things more easily than positive ones, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you just gave a talk. Maybe it was a talk to your team, maybe you're pitching a VC, maybe you're just doing whatever, and you got this feedback after your talk. Which part stands out to you the most? Come put it in the chat. Which word or words kind of make you feel the most in terms of your response? Go put it in there. Yeah, I see the almighty but, right? The negative part, a bit long, right? And, I think for a majority of us, somebody said uplifting, excellent. As I've done this across tens of thousands of people, I found that the vast majority definitely feel that sense of, what? Ran a bit long, like, what's your problem, right? Even though there are 4 nice things, the one negative thing does tend to create the most visceral response. And that's because we have a negativity bias. Now, the thing is, it was great, again, evolutionary wise. Remember that there's saber-toothed tigers over there. Don't eat from this bush because the last 3 people who did died, right? We want to remember the things that can threaten us and kill us. But since we're no longer eating out of bushes, it can be a hindrance sometimes. So what we want to do is learn to balance our positivity with negativity. Okay, now some people say that the ratio should be like 3 positives and 1 negative. Others say it's some other number. The bottom line is there's no one right answer, but it's really just having more positive than negative if we want to be emotionally healthy, right? Now, let me say something here that's really important. This does not mean ignoring negative or unpleasant emotions. I think it's really important to say that. It doesn't mean being a Pollyanna, everything's great. Okay, unpleasant or negative emotions such as anger or fear or grief or sadness are actually all very appropriate for many situations, especially the ones we've been through over the last few years. And I actually encourage you to give yourselves permission to feel those things. That's actually the name of Mark Brackett's book. But what we want to do is balance it out so we don't get pulled into a negative vortex, right? I mean, let's face it. There is no shortage of negatives input and stimuli in our lives, right? I mean, all you got to do is pick up this thing and start looking at it if you want like a dose of negativity. So what we need to do is be intentionally positive so we can balance it out. Now, here's a funny one I use at Amazon. I said, hey, when was the last time you woke up in the morning, you thought, yesterday, my workday was just way too positive. I really hope I have more negativity today to balance out all that positivity. When was the last time you had that experience? Right? Maybe never, depending on the job you're in or the company you work at. And so the fact is, again, we have to be intentional about working on that. So let's go ahead and look a little research and then an idea of how to do that. Positivity, or looking at the things that are positive versus negative, actually has been found to improve your performance, cause you to have higher quality in your work and better customer service. And did you know that it actually also improves your immune response, your cardiac health, and frankly helps you live longer? There are studies done at the Boston University and Harvard that found that when you actually have a positive bent, and that creates sort of that optimism, that those people who generally have that have a 50% greater chance of living past 85 than pessimists do. Wow. So it actually extends your lifespan as well. I mean, it's kind of amazing, actually. So there's a lot of really benefits to having positivity. Now, you may be thinking right now, yes, I'm a positive person. This is great. I tend to see the good in things. I'm going to live a long life and be successful. Or you may be thinking, oh, great. I'm kind of pessimistic. I'm a bit negative. Does that mean I'm going to face an early demise and not succeed? Okay, no. All right. The good news is it can absolutely increase your general level of positivity with something very simple. And that is what I call the 3x3, which is essentially gratitude. And, this is a simple exercise. Some people call it gratitude journaling. But what you do is you basically write down 3 things you're grateful for each day for 3 weeks. And just by doing that one simple thing, it actually can make you more positive. And this is actually because of the way our brains work. When you actually take time and intentionally do that, you train your brain to notice more things around you to be grateful for, and then in turn elevates your mood. This is, in fact, the #1 technique used by therapists to treat people with depression. And for some people, it's been found to be even more effective than antidepressants, because it's that idea of you're actually doing this cognitive brain rewiring to notice it. Example that you may relate to. I bought a new car a little while back, Hyundai Genesis, love it, 330 horsepower, jet black, it's beautiful, right? So between the time I decided to buy that and the time I actually found a good deal was a few weeks. And as I was driving around the roads of the San Francisco Bay Area, guess what I saw everywhere I drove, right? You got it. Hyundai Genesises. Now, did the world suddenly go and buy more Hyundais? No, of course not. It was on my mind, so I noticed it more around me. The same exact thing happens with gratitude. Now, let me give you a super pro tip. If you want to supercharge this practice, instead of just writing it down yourself, send a note of gratitude to someone else. Send it to, your colleague, your friend, your significant other, whoever it could be. It'd be a text, it could be telling them in person, it could be email. No matter what it is, if you just do that on a regular basis, you actually wind up boosting your mood and theirs as well. And I've actually done this exercise with groups of people where we'll have a team and I'll say, who would like to share some gratitude for someone else on their team, a colleague? And for some of them, they've literally never done this before at work. And after doing it for a few minutes, I mean, it is amazing the smiles that I and everyone else has, because we literally created more dopamine and serotonin while doing that practice. And those are the 2 main neurotransmitters targeted by antidepressants. So the way I think about gratitude, it's a super antidepressant. It's free of charge. You don't need a prescription. There's an unlimited supply, and you can basically leverage it anytime to be more positive. So the other thing that is also a great technique to be more positive is to set your mind with self-compassion. And essentially, the idea is this. It's from Martin Seligman, who's one of the founders of positive psychology. He says, when things go awry or you screw up something or things don't go the way you want, instead of thinking of it as pervasive, personal, and permanent, think of it as specific, external, and transitory, right? SET. So here's an example, right? Let's say you blew something. Let's say you messed up, you made a mistake. Instead of saying, oh, I always mess this up, say, this time it happened. Instead of, oh, I'm such an idiot, say, I made a mistake, right? Instead of, This always happens to me. You know, I'm never going to change. Go, okay, here's what I learned from it. Here's my responsibility. You see the difference there? You're still realizing it didn't go well. You're still taking responsibility. You're still learning, but it's not pervasive, and this too shall pass. So really, really important, really throughout our lives, because we're going to mess up a lot. We're going to learn a lot of things. We're not going to get everything right. And so having this actually really helps us continue forward and have more of that sense of, you know, doing the things we need to do because we have some self-compassion. And I'll tell you one little pro tip that I use is I call the 10-10-10 method. Let's say something, you know, gets, you made a mistake. You blew something. I ask myself, will I care about this in 10 days? Will I care about this in 10 weeks? Will I care about this in 10 months? And often it's no, no, and no. I may not care about this in 10 minutes. So why am I spending all this time flustered about it? So that's actually a really great way of having some self-compassion. Now, I want to take you through one of my favorite exercises. I've done this again with, you know, lots and lots of people, and this generally tends to be one of the most popular ones. It's something you can do in real time, anywhere, anytime, to help you actually create more positivity and optimism and trust by producing oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone that you probably have heard of, but it does everything you see here on the screen. And you get it by giving someone a hug, taking a walk out in nature, having a baby, having sex. You know, some of those are easier to do during the workday than others, right? But there's something you can do at any given moment that actually can boost your oxytocin, and that is through mindful breathing. It's used by CEOs and Olympic athletes and elite military units actually around the world. So I actually want to teach this to you because you may find it really handy. So what I'm going to do is actually lead you through something that the Navy SEALs use, you know, one of the most elite military units in the world, right? They use it in tactical situations where bullets are literally flying around them and they need to be calm and think more clearly. And they call it box breathing. And essentially it means you breathe in for a 4 count, you hold it for a 4 count, you breathe out for a 4 count, and you keep it out for a 4 count. And you do that for a couple of minutes, and it makes a tremendous difference. So don't take my word for it. I want to actually ask you to do it with me for a couple of minutes. And if you've never done this before, it may seem super goofy. I totally get it, but just humor me for 2 minutes of your life. You may find that you learned something that may be valuable for many years to come. So I'm going to ask you to please go ahead, close your eyes. And I can't see you, so I'll take your word for it that you're doing it, okay? Close your eyes, let your shoulders relax. Let out your breath. In through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. In through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now do it on your own for a few cycles and really try to take in a nice big full breath on the way in. Fill those lungs and really try to get all that carbon dioxide out on the way out. Some people actually like to put their hand right on their chest or their diaphragm so they feel the lungs expand and they feel the lungs contract. And try to focus on your breath as well, you know, wherever it sits. Maybe it's in the nostrils, maybe it's in your chest or your throat, wherever it may be. Just kind of focus on that breath. If you have random thoughts come to mind, just try to gently bring your focus back to that breath. Okay, one more cycle of a box breath. Okay, open your eyes. How did that feel? Go and put it in the chat. I'd actually love to see it. I personally, whenever I do this, I don't want to stop. I'm like, this feels so good to me. But put in the chat, what's a word or phrase that describes how you feel? Somebody's yawning. That actually may be a sign of needing more sleep. But it does happen to some people. Okay, I see relaxing. All right, other words. Another relaxing, another grounding, calming. All right, relaxing. Excellent. So here's the thing, right? Believe it or not, you just created more oxytocin. And this isn't just some goofy practice somebody came up with. I mean, the Navy SEALs use it, and there's a reason, because there's an actual physiological benefit to doing it. one of the things that you actually wind up doing is you also wind up activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the amygdala system. And so it actually decreases heart rate and blood pressure and downregulates really intense emotions like fear, or anxiety, or anger. So if you're ever feeling anxious or you're feeling angry, doing this can make a big difference to downregulate. And for those who are having a hard time sleeping earlier, this is beautiful as you're trying to go to sleep, because it activates that rest and digest system, the parasympathetic. It actually helps get your body more relaxed and ready to sleep. So try it out. I know a lot of people have come back to me and said, wow, I've started doing this when I get into bed and has really helped me with my sleep. So a tip that you can use anytime, and if you know you're about to go into a contentious situation, something where there might be, high emotional levels, or you just feel like you need more calming effect, beautiful thing. You can do it anytime. Really, really powerful. All right. So I'm going to go through this next section pretty quickly, and then I'll dive into some of the social competencies. You want more grit. One of the most powerful things that, again, was mentioned by Paul Graham is that sense of determination. You can call it grit, you can call it mental toughness, you can call a lot of different things. The point is, I keep on going despite challenges and failures and pain that I may face. Angela Duckworth has done some great research and found that, in her mind, it's the #1 key to success. So how do you increase your grit? Maybe you already have some, maybe you have medium, maybe you have high, but there are times in our life where we need more, such as the last couple of years. And so you create more by doing a few things. #1 is making friends. And I say at work because the reality is we spend a lot of time at work. Maybe you're still in school, or maybe you're going to get, a job, or maybe you've started a company, and you're sort of in that phase of trying to get it going. Bottom line is, at some point you will spend a lot of time at work. So having friends there can make a big difference. Having people you can be authentic with, you can let down with, you can laugh with, you can connect with, is one of the greatest buffers to the stress that we do face at work. And of course, in your personal life, important as well. This is why the Navy SEALs call themselves teams, right? They're doing some of the most stressful things in the world, and they say, I'm on a team. This next thing is reframing with gratitude and generosity. It's a very simple but incredibly powerful concept. And that means when you're facing really tough and challenging times, simply asking a question, which is, what can I be grateful for, even in this challenging situation? How can this teach me something? What can I learn to be a better or stronger person? Just by doing that one simple thing, we can actually increase our grit and determination to move forward. This is actually from research done by Martin Seligman, whom I mentioned earlier, when he was working with the US Army. He was actually trying to get them to complete their training and their missions at a higher rate. And he didn't get them to do more push-ups or endure more physical duress. He actually taught them this one technique, asking themselves the gratitude question and reframing and finding something to be grateful for had a quantifiable increase on their success rate. And then the generosity part was actually for the leaders. A lot of the drill instructors, basically, when people weren't performing up to standard, or not doing what they could, they generally assume negative intent. You're just lazy, you're a slouch, you're not trying. And he taught them, look, try to be generous instead. Assume positive intent. And instead of assuming negative, think maybe there's something hindering them. Maybe there's something I could do to help. And just by doing that one change of their frame also helped dramatically increase the success rates. So having this framing of gratitude and generosity absolutely helps us be grittier, and also helps those around us as well. And so really powerful technique. And the final one is start with why, right? And it's very simply put this way: understanding the reason and purpose for why you're doing what you're doing is one of the most powerful things you can do to help boost your grit. Angela Duckworth has found this to be true. Simon Sinek, of course, has a great book called Start With Why, and an incredible TED Talk about that. When you really have the why, that absolutely trumps the what and the how when it comes to really continuing and making an impact and pushing through hard times. And so those things can all be great. And so if you're not sure why, a simple question can be, how will what I'm doing benefit fill in the blank? My loved ones, my friends, my team, my colleague, maybe even the whole world. If you can actually have that clear in your mind, one of the most powerful things you can do to increase your grit. I tell you, during the pandemic, it's been really hard for me, for my family, for all my colleagues. I mean, it has been, tough for everybody on the planet, really. And I see it in person. But one of the things that has made such an incredibly positive impact on my colleagues who are part of my volunteer team of what I call EQ champions who spread emotional intelligence across Amazon is having the opportunity to actually share about this very thing with our colleagues. That as we've delivered these talks to 100,000 people, as we've interacted with people and shared techniques on how to reduce, their stress, as we've helped people be more resilient, it has made such a difference because we understand this is why we're doing it. It is having a positive impact on so many people around the world, and our colleagues. And that in so many ways has been the thing that has helped us be elevated in our mood and our ability to keep on forward during some challenging times. So really, really powerful technique. So thank you for the comments, by the way. Yes, box breathing is absolutely powerful and in so many ways. So I'm going to pause here. If there's any questions you have, put in the chat before I head into the final section on social competence. But if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put in the chat. I'll try to answer them, as we kind of roll forward here. And we'll also reserve a little time at the end. But if you think of something or you have a thought or comment, please put in there and I will try to address it. All right. The final piece is social competence. And I could talk about this for hours and hours, but I'll just talk about one small thing that I hope can give you some ideas about how to improve our ability to build relationships, right? And the one concept I want to share is essentially the power of attunement. Daniel Pink has a great book called To Sell is Human. And I think all of you can relate to that as entrepreneurs and business leaders. I mean, you're trying to sell to get investors, you're trying to sell your product, you're trying to sell the customers, trying to sell ideas. And he says that the new ABCs of selling are attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. And attunement is the ability to bring one's actions and outlook into harmony with other people and the context that you're in. So there are some ways that we can actually be more attuned to other people so that we can actually be more effective at influencing them for mutual benefit. They are presence, likability, and perspective seeking. And I'll just touch upon them for the sake of time, but I do want to at least bring those to your mind, and then I'll give you some more resources you can leverage in the days to come. So what is presence? Essentially just means I'm really here. Like, have you met someone where it's clearly they were distracted or they weren't that interested in what you're saying? I mean, what a total turnoff, right? When you actually pay full attention with open-mindedness, it is one of the most powerful things that we can do to help ourselves be more attuned. Bain actually found that it's the single most important attribute for inspirational leadership. They looked at like 33 different dimensions of the most inspiring leaders, and they found that presence or centeredness was the most important one. So one pro tip that I use to be more present, whether it's virtually or in person, is before I have any meeting, I go big. And what does that mean? It means breathe, take a breath, just like we did. Set your intention of how you want to show up during that meeting. Maybe it's, empathetic. Maybe it's assertive. Maybe it's convincing. Maybe it's energetic. Maybe, whatever it may be. And then think about one thing you're grateful for why you're having that meeting. So take a breath, set your intention, have some gratitude, and then go into that meeting. One of the most powerful things we can do just to get our mind so that, in a sense, we're kind of getting up to the surface like that bear, floating and ready to go. I use this all the time. It's really made a huge difference. You can also do this at the very beginning of the day, right? As you wake up in the morning, before you even, put your feet onto the ground. So the second thing is likability. It's interesting because we don't actually talk about that very much, but it's actually really important in as much as you're able to create that. Robert Cialdini, who wrote really kind of like the Bible of influence, talks about 6 keys to influencing people. And one of the ones he talks about is likability, right? And you may not be liked by everyone, and the goal is not to be universally liked. So I get that. But the point is, if you can be, why not? I mean, who would you rather listen to? Somebody you like or somebody you don't like? I mean, it's just sort of a fundamental human quality. So there are ways to actually increase our likability. One of them is just finding things that are similar, right? I mean, whether it's a sports team, a movie you saw, anything can actually instantly increase that sense of, hey, we're like humans. And there are plenty of things that make us dissimilar. We're all unique. But if we can actually find a few things that do make us similar, it actually activates that human desire to like someone. The other thing is just pay genuine compliments, right? Dale Carnegie wrote an incredible book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he says, just be nice and say nice things. Like, why not? We hear plenty of negative things all the time. Why not be somebody that's spreading some more genuinely admirable compliments? I love this quote from Mark Twain. He said, I could live for 2 months on a good compliment, right? It really is meaningful. And the final thing is, I call it adopt a really useful attitude. And it's because our emotions are contagious. We have these things in our brain called mirror neurons that basically fire in the same way that other people's are. So if they're angry, we tend to feel angry. If they're, afraid, we tend to feel afraid. If they're happy, we tend to feel happier. And so I'll give you an example, right? Who would you rather meet with for a business meeting? This person or this person? Right? I mean, obviously it's the same person, but I mean, which version of the person, right? I mean, most people like, what is the problem with that second guy, right? It's the point of, the attitude can make a difference, right? And so what you have as an attitude will greatly influence the attitude of the people around you. So if you have a useful attitude, you'll absolutely create a more useful attitude in others. And so what are some of these useful attitudes? There's many, but I'll just name a few. Enthusiasm. If I'm excited and genuinely interested, in meeting you, happy to do so, you're much more likely to want that as well. And let me pull on the interest thread a little bit. Interest and curiosity essentially means I actually want to know about you and what's important to you. And did you know that people actually get more pleasure out of self-disclosure and talking about things that are meaningful to them than either food or money? And Oprah, one of the greatest interviewers of all time, she said that, regardless of whether you're President Barack Obama or Beyonce or a father serving a life sentence in prison, they all basically asked the same question after the interview. And that was, how did I do? How was it? And what she interpreted that as, did you hear what I said? Did my story matter to you? So, having a genuine interest, and, this is kind of one of those myths, actually. A lot of people talk about charisma and, how can you win people over? And they think you got to act like James Bond or something. And that's totally a myth. The research has absolutely found that the best way to be likable and charismatic and all the things that we tend to think of movie stars as having is genuinely being interested in other people. Because frankly, they'd rather talk than hear you talk. And if you actually care, it makes a huge difference. And the final thing is liking them. Now, this may sound super basic, but the reality is if you decide to like someone first, they're much more likely to like you back. And so when I meet new people, I basically assume I'm going to like them unless they prove otherwise. And, 99.99% of people justify my desire to like them. They don't prove otherwise. So just going into meetings and going, I'm going to find something I like. I've already decided I like them. I'm just going to substantiate that can actually make a big difference. And somebody mentioned it, yes, in negotiations, whatever it may be, when you do more of that, it can make a huge difference. It's really interesting. They did some studies where they found that doctors who actually spend a little time actually doing some of this and being more likable were sued way less than doctors who are not likable, regardless of their skills and the number of mistakes they made, right? Because the fact is, people don't actually sue doctors because of the mistakes. They sue doctors because they weren't likable and they made a mistake. But if you like them, you're much more likely to be gracious and give someone a break. So the final thing, along with this, is what I call perspective seeking. And essentially, it means really trying to understand the other person's perspective. So take a look at this sort of, semi-famous picture. Tell me what you see. Put it into the chat. Do you see an older lady or do you see a younger lady? You can put whichever one. Do you see an older lady or a younger lady? And if you've seen this before, you might see both, right? I always get both because you've seen it before. But especially if you're seeing this for the first time, which do you see? All right. I see younger, see lots of youngers. Okay. And there's actually a psychological reason for that. If you are a younger person, you're going to tend to actually see the younger lady. So there's some, little priming going on there. But if you see the younger person, try to see the older lady. If you see the older lady, try to see the younger lady. Do you see it? Is it hard? Is it easy? Right? So the reason I show this is because it's a metaphor for pretty much every interaction we have with another human being, which is they're going to see something and you're going to see something, and who's right? Right? You're both right, because it's different perspectives. And so one of the most powerful things we can do if we're trying to tune to someone is to seek their perspective. And basically, it's asking questions. It's active listening. It's having a conversation until we actually understand what they are feeling and what they are thinking. Basically, a lot of studies have been done on negotiations and things like that. And the INSEAD School of Business found that if you understand what the other person's not just feeling, but also thinking, you got to know both, that absolutely improves negotiations. And this is the single most important skill for hostage negotiators, believe it or not. Chris Voss writes about it in his book, Never Split the Difference. I've talked to quite a few hostage negotiators, like actual, real ones, and they say this sense of tactical empathy, understanding where the other person is coming from, is so important to have any influence, right, into a tune. And here's the thing. Empathy and understanding doesn't mean you have to agree. I mean, clearly the hostage negotiators do not agree with what the hostage takers are doing, but they have to establish this first before they can have any conversation or connection. And I'll give you a really interesting pro tip from Chris Voss, who is a lead negotiator for the FBI for many years. He calls this mirroring. And what he does is when he wants somebody to kind of keep on talking, he essentially just repeats the last 3 or so words of what they just said in an upward inflecting tone. And by doing so, it lets the people know that they're listening, and it also encourages them to keep on talking, right? So I'll give you an example. In my world, cloud technology, somebody may say, hey, I'm really concerned about moving my workloads to the cloud because I'm just not sure about how secure it is. How secure it is? Yeah, I'm just not sure about how secure it is. I mean, I spent a long time hardening my security and my hardware and my networking, and we put a lot of effort into it, and I think we're pretty good at it. So I just don't know if others can be as good. Not sure if others can be as good. Yeah, I just don't know what you guys have done to be able to make it as good, because we've spent all this time. So you do it for a few times, and what it does is it helps people just kind of express themselves more. Now, clearly, you cannot do this over and over and over for half an hour. They will eventually go, what are you doing? But especially if you're a little stuck, if you're not sure what to say, if you want to encourage the other person to talk, one of the best ways to be able to help seek their perspectives in a more effective way. So obviously, this is not a comprehensive treatment of how to have a great conversation, but there are some things that can make a difference. So I want to basically give a little time for questions. And so if you have a question, either feel free to put in the chat, or go ahead and come online onto the the screen, and I would be happy to be able to answer a few. And then I'll have some resources at the end. All right, looks like Grace showed up.
Oh, Richard, there was a question in the chat about some of the books you recommended. If you could send me that list, we'll put it on the Innovation Center. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Yeah, here are some excellent books I highly recommend. The first 3 are foundational for emotional intelligence understanding. Permission to Feel, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and Emotional Intelligence. And so I would highly recommend at least one of those 3 to start off with, and then there's some other ones as well. And I also have a website actually that I created that you can go to and get more resources if you want. So anyway, I'll say this because these are resources, but I really encourage you to practice one of these techniques, try it out, see how it is, find someone to practice together, one of the most effective ways to grow. And then I do have a website, richardhua.co, with more books and curated TED Talks and articles and other resources that you can basically look at to help continue your journey. All right, any other questions? Yes, richardhua.co. Thank you for putting that in there. But again, you can either put in the chat or appear on the camera. I'd love to see at least a few of your faces to know that you actually exist and you're out there. I believe you are, but love to see if you have a question. Rich, if you stop sharing, I think maybe you'll be able to see everyone.
Oh, okay. Are people actually? Oh, okay. That is a little better. All right. I have stopped sharing. So somebody asked, how did you make the transition from CS and engineering from church now teaching EQ? Okay, I'll give you the short version. As I shared in my story, have been very interested in this for many years because I saw the incredible benefit in my life. And essentially what I did was I started small, and I started teaching small groups of people emotional intelligence skills at Amazon. And because it was high quality and it spoke and it resonated with people, more and more people requested that these sessions be delivered. And then people started coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, I want to help out. What can I do? And so we basically created this whole group of what I call EQ champions who work together with me to basically help share this. And so, you know, it's that idea of start small, but start today. And also if you build it, they will come. And it grew and grew. And over time, I eventually wrote basically a document, which is how we do it at Amazon, to make this a full-time job. And it was approved because we saw the need. So actually, if you want to see a much fuller explanation of my career journey, it's got a whole bunch of tips on career success and how to make a pivot and how to get promoted and how to influence people in a positive way. It's on my website. There's a whole interview I do with Ethan Evans about my career journey and how I've used emotional intelligence to help me succeed.
Great. We have now 1 minute. I just want to thank everyone. Thank you, Rich, for sharing your insights on such an important topic. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. The Innovation Center is supported by the University of Nevada, Reno. And if you would like to become a member of the Innovation Center, there's a link to our website. And I think, Anya, you're putting that link in the chat room. You can find information about our facility and membership. And if you would like to be on our mailing list, send us an email, and we'll hope you join us again for future speaker events. Thank you all very much, and have a great afternoon. And thank you, Rich.
It's been a pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.